Dear YouTube, as you know, under copyright law, I am allowed to use portions of copyrighted material, in this case copyrighted material belonging to the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Pennsylvania, so long as this is used for the purpose of criticism and parody. Please remember this when Watchtower comes complaining, because I've embarrassed them by using their propaganda in a way they disapprove of. Thank you. Hello there. Well, as you know, occasionally I get sent material that hasn't been seen by the majority of people, let alone Jehovah's Witnesses, and yesterday was no exception. Yesterday was April 2nd, and I got sent a video that had been filmed that same day on April 2nd, and it was a video of a branch visit by a governing body member to Spain. Now, the governing body member was Mark Sanderson, and he was giving a talk with the aid of a Spanish interpreter to his audience, which I think included people who were tied in from various locations. And the person who sent me this video said that they were able to access it on the instructions that they weren't to share it or record it. And obviously that rule has already been broken. So I now have the video and I can do a rebuttal. Now, it was a rather long video, and I'm going to be honest, a very boring video. I kind of had it on in my headphones and was listening to it because it was over an hour long, and it's difficult to listen to an interpreted a talk that's been interpreted into another language, because obviously you're having to wait for the interpreter to finish before the next bit starts and what have you. So it was quite difficult to listen to, but my ears did prick up on one or two occasions. And I thought it would be really interesting to do a rebuttal video to some of those parts that I found interesting. So here you have my quickest ever turnaround rebuttal video to material that's been sent out by the governing body. And it's Mark Sanderson in Spain, and let's roll the clip.
So it's true that sometimes external things can bring us joy.
Es verdad que a veces las cosas externas fuera de nosotros nos pueden traer gozo.
For example, perhaps today you're with brothers and sisters you haven't seen for some time.
Por ejemplo, quizás hoy estáis juntos con hermanos y hermanas que hace tiempo que no habíais visto.
Well, just seeing them, gives you a feeling of joy.
Solo verlos, uno siente gozo.
Or maybe some of us brothers, you come home and you smell it. Oh my, it's your favorite dish.
Quizás alguno llega a casa y el olfato, el olor de tu plato favorito.
Well, immediately you feel joy in your heart.
Sin demora, un gozo en el corazón, o un poco más abajo.
But the truth is, that type of joy, it comes for a minute and it goes very quickly.
Pero, de verdad, siendo francos, ese tipo de gozo viene un momento y se nos va.
Did we just see the interpreter having a little bit of fun at Sanderson's expense? I will let you decide. It's certainly no surprise to me that Mark is a huge fan of food, but I just think it's interesting that Sanderson effortlessly slips into this stereotype of the man returning home and the woman preparing his favourite meal. That, for me, really typifies the misogynistic 1950s world that the governing body members live in. Now, though, Mark has some advice to share on the importance of attending meetings.
But have you ever had this experience?
Pero alguna vez has pasado por la siguiente experiencia.
Now it's meeting night.
Hay reunión esta noche.
It's about 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Más o menos sobre las 13 horas.
We think we're getting a headache.
Nos parece que nos empieza a doler la cabeza.
You know what I mean?
¿Sabes lo que quiero decir?
It's 3 o'clock.
A las 15 horas.
We think it might be a big headache.
Quizás sea un dolor de cabeza de los gordos.
By 5 o'clock,
a las 17 horas,
we're not sure we should go to the meeting.
No sabemos si debemos asistir a la reunión.
And by the time of the meeting,
y para la hora de la reunión,
we stay at home.
nos quedamos en casa.
Well, you see, that's an experience that people have all over the world.
Esa es una experiencia que es común a algunas personas por todo el mundo.
But let me ask you something.
Pero una pregunta,
When you stay home from the meeting, do you really feel better?
cuando uno se queda en casa durante la reunión, ¿de
Sí.
verdad que se siente mejor?
You see, on the other hand, probably sometimes we've had that headache and we made the effort to go to the meeting.
Por otra parte, alguna vez habremos tenido ese dolor de cabeza, habremos acudido a la reunión.
And how did we feel at the end?
¿Y cómo nos sentimos después?
Refreshed,
Refrescados,
encouraged,
animados,
upbuilt. You
edificados.
see, we received Jehovah's Holy Spirit.
Recibimos, como ves, como sabemos, el Espíritu Santo de Jehová.
Yes, you heard it here first, folks. This is new light straight out of the mouth of a governing body member. If you have a headache, this is not an excuse for you to miss the meeting. In fact, even if there was an earthquake and there was huge devastation in your town or city, this would still not be an excuse for you to miss the meeting.
You see, when the tsunami occurred in Japan,
Cuando ocurrió el gran tsunami en el Japón,
you know, the brothers all over the world contributed relief supplies to help our brothers.
sabéis que los hermanos en todo el mundo contribuyeron bienes materiales para ayudar a nuestros hermanos en el Japón.
But one of the sisters who was right in the middle of the area that was affected,
Pero una de las hermanas que estaba justo en el centro de la zona más afectada
this is what she said.
dijo lo siguiente.
I appreciate very much all the relief effort.
Dice, agradezco mucho todos los esfuerzos por traer ayuda humanitaria,
But more than anything else,
pero más que cualquier otra cosa,
the congregation meetings have been our support and strength.
las reuniones de congregación han servido de apoyo y fortaleza para nosotros.
From immediately after the earthquake,
Justo después del terremoto,
all of the meetings have been held.
se han celebrado todas las reuniones.
So we have been fed spiritually.
Así nos hemos alimentado espiritualmente
And we feel a peace of mind
y tenemos una paz mental
and a protection from Jehovah that's beyond our comprehension.
y sentimos una protección de Jehová que se escapa de nuestra comprensión.
Well, is that how you feel about the meetings, brothers?
¿Así te sientes tú acerca de las reuniones, todos nosotros?
This for me is clear guilt tripping. Jehovah's Witnesses should get to their meetings even if they're in bad health and even if their home is destroyed by an earthquake. I've got news for Mark Sanderson. There is nothing special about attending a meeting other than the feeling of fellowship and community and association that you can get in almost any other religion or non-religious community. Just because people meet together and pat themselves on the back for believing in the correct God or the correct interpretation of the Bible doesn't mean that that gives them special power to overcome calamity. But in an attempt to prove his point, Mark is now going to tell us his experience as just another Jehovah's Witness who attends a congregation in Manhattan.
Well, let me tell you something about the area where I serve in New York.
Os cuento algo de la zona alrededor de Nueva York donde yo sirvo.
So now the congregation is right in the middle of Manhattan.
La congregación se encuentra justo en el centro de Manhattan.
And when we have our midweek meeting,
Cuando celebramos la reunión de entre semana,
I have to tell you the truth.
tengo que ser franco con vosotros.
When we see the brothers come in the door of the Kingdom Hall,
Cuando vemos que los hermanos entran por la puerta del Salón del Reino,
they all look a little bit crazy.
crazy,
Mm-hmm.
se ven todos un poco descolocados, un poco loquitos.
Now, do you know what I mean?
¿Sabes lo que quiero decir?
You see, the brothers in the city, they have to come many times right from work.
Sabéis que los hermanos en la ciudad muchas veces tienen que venir directamente de su trabajo al salón.
And they have to get onto the subway.
Tienen que meterse en el metro.
And all these people are pushing them and shoving them.
Y todo este poblacho está empujando y agarrándolos.
And the people are using filthy language.
Y el lenguaje suez.
And people are smoking.
Y están fumando.
And they have to try to get through all of this.
y tienen que hacer lo necesario para penetrar todo eso.
Yes, because as we all know, if you're not a Jehovah's Witness and you use the subway, you're going to be smoking, you're going to be using foul language, and you're going to be pushing and shoving.
And they walk in the door of the Kingdom Hall,
Y pasan, entran por el Salón del Reino,
and
la puerta,
they just look like, you know.
y se expresan.
If anyone out there is good at making GIFs, I think I've just given you some grade A material.
Do you know what I mean?
¿Sabéis lo que quiero decir?
You see, maybe you feel that way sometimes.
Tal vez a veces tú mismo te sientes así.
But you know, we start to have our meeting.
Pero sabes que
And
empieza la
we
reunión
sing and we pray,
y cantamos y oramos
and we hear all of this wonderful information.
y escuchamos toda esta información magnífica
And you see, by the end of the meeting,
y para la conclusión de la reunión
we just feel like we're everything is back to normal again. You see?
nos parece que todo ha vuelto a la normalidad otra vez.
We've remade our connection with Jehovah.
Hemos reconectado con Jehová.
It's wonderful.
Es magnífico.
In the mind of Mark Sanderson, a Jehovah's Witness loses their connection with Jehovah simply by taking an uncomfortable subway ride. And then through the course of an indoctrination session, this connection is re-established and all is well. I think what's more likely is that if you do have an uncomfortable commute on the New York subway, or for other reasons you're stressed, you're running late, not everything is going well, and then you turn up at a place where you're surrounded by friends and you can sit down for 2 hours of fairly boring material, by the end of that you'll be quite placated and you won't be stressed anymore and you will be at peace. This does not mean that you have had your connection with a deity re-established. It just means that you've had some chance to unwind and catch your breath. But this, in the mind of Mark Sanderson, is proof that meetings have a mystical ability to empower witnesses and to get them closer to Jehovah. Now we're going to be regaled with a couple of experiences, the purpose of which I believe is to remind us of Mark Sanderson's importance and the prestige that comes with being a governing body member.
But you know, never did I appreciate this so much.
Pero sabéis que nunca me di cuenta a plenitud de esto tanto
Until one time I went to visit Korea,
hasta en cierta ocasión en Corea fui a visitar,
and the brothers asked me if I would go to the prison
fui a visitar a Corea y preguntaron si yo podría visitar la prisión
and give a talk for 40 of our young brothers.
y presentar un discurso a 40 de nuestros hermanos jóvenes.
Now these brothers, they're all somewhere between the ages of maybe 19 and 22.
Estos hermanos tienen edad de 18 a 22 años.
I think it's fairly safe to assume that these 40 young brothers who are getting treated to a papal visit by a governing body member are in fact conscientious objectors. And this issue was raised in a JW Broadcasting episode featuring Mark Sanderson. If you look back in my back catalogue of JW Broadcasting rebuttals and find the 7th one, it was in that video that we learned about conscientious objectors in South Korea and the fact that essentially it's a needless situation that we have where young witnesses are going to prison essentially just because Watchtower doesn't like them handling guns in any way, shape or form. So I've done a little bit of checking prior to filming this part because I said in the JW Broadcasting rebuttal, I said that it was probably a year that these guys were required to do military service for. In fact, it turns out it's 21 to 24 months for military service, whether it's in the Army or Navy, and it's 24 to 36 months if you opt instead to do non-active and non-fighting military service, which would seem like a perfect alternative if you are a Jehovah's Witness who doesn't believe in violence of any sort, if you're a pacifist. But the problem with Watchtower, the problem with Jehovah's Witnesses, is that Watchtower objects to people even handling guns and learning how to use them. And if you do military service in South Korea, you have to do, I think it's 5 weeks of basic training, which will obviously involve, learning how to assemble and load and fire a weapon. Watchtower objects to this because, as far as they're concerned, Jehovah's Witnesses are not to learn war anymore. What this means, of course, is that the 40 young chaps who Mark Sanderson went to see in a South Korean jail were very likely there in the first place, at least in part due to the governing body's stubbornness on this issue, and insistence that if you're a Jehovah's Witness, you're not even allowed to so much as pick up and fire a weapon.
And when I went into the prison, of course, we were in a room and all these young men were just sitting in the chairs.
Y cuando entré en la prisión, llegué a la habitación, la dependencia, y todos esos hermanos estaban sentados en las sillas.
And they looked absolutely exhausted.
Y se les veía totalmente extenuados.
They were very stressed.
Estresados, muy.
And very tired.
Muy cansados.
And when I went around to try to speak with them,
y cuando pasé por ahí entre uno y otro intentando hablar con ellos,
I almost got no reaction.
Casi no hubo reacción.
No surprises that a governing body member like Mark Sanderson expects a reaction when he walks into a room full of Jehovah's Witnesses. Only in this case, he wasn't walking into a kingdom hall or an assembly hall. He was walking into a room in a South Korean prison where young men were serving jail time due to the governing body's stubbornness on conscientious objection.
Well, the meeting began.
Empezó la reunión.
I gave a talk on the subject, Never Be Ashamed.
Di un discurso sobre el tema, Nunca te avergüences.
And I spoke with him about the Bible examples of the many trials of those who had been faithful to Jehovah.
Y consideré con ellos los ejemplos bíblicos de los muchos que habían pasado por pruebas, siervos de Jehová.
Even though these ones were humiliated by the world,
aunque aquellos el mundo les humilló,
they were never ashamed.
Nunca sentían vergüenza, nunca se avergonzaban.
They were proud to be servants of Jehovah.
Tenían orgullo legítimo de ser siervos de Jehová.
Well, after the talk, we had the Watchtower study.
Y después del discurso tuvimos la consideración de la atalaya.
All these young men began commenting.
Y todos esos jóvenes empezaron a comentar.
And then after, the brothers gave me a few minutes to do a question and answer.
Y después me dieron unos minutos para preguntas y respuestas.
And the brothers told me, our brothers in Korea, they're very shy, they won't ask any questions.
Me habían dicho, los coreanos son muy tímidos, no van a preguntar nada.
I said, I'm going to do it anyway.
Y él dijo, de todos modos lo voy a hacer.
So I said, does anyone have a question?
Dije, ¿alguien tiene una pregunta?
All the hands went up.
Toda mano para arriba.
And the questions they asked were amazing.
Y sabes que las preguntas que hicieron fueron asombrosas.
They asked, how should we do our Bible reading?
¿Cómo debemos leer la Biblia?
What should our personal study projects be?
Nuestro proyecto de estudio personal, ¿en qué debe consistir?
What spiritual goals should we have?
¿Qué metas espirituales serían apropiadas?
I was very touched by the beautiful questions.
Me emocionó la hermosura de sus preguntas.
But everywhere in the world we have what we call in America time Nazis.
Pero
we call them time Nazis.
Okay. Pero ya sabéis que por todo el mundo tenemos lo que llaman los dictadores de horario, de tiempo.
Sí. So that's what the brothers.
El Omega.
So the brothers were all. So
así los hermanos estaban.
We had to stop.
Tenemos que parar.
Because the meeting is only a certain time in the prison.
Porque en la prisión solo se aparta un tiempo definido, específico para la reunión.
So we closed with the song 135.
Así concluimos con el cántico 135. Aguantemos hasta el fin.
Yeah, see yourself when all is new.
5 or 4?
135. See yourself when all is new.
Bueno, el que dice, cuando todo es nuevo, ¿cómo serás?
Yeah.
Creo que
This,
es 134.
this is this beautiful.
134.
This is this. Oh, is it 134? This is the beautiful. Okay, okay. So.
135 is the last one, and it's endured to the end.
Oh, thank you, thank you. He's right.
Awkward. Somebody doesn't know his song numbers and it isn't the interpreter. It's good to see the Holy Spirit blessing the event, and especially the member of the faithful and discreet slave on the platform, so that there are no distractions from the important information that is being discussed.
So this is this beautiful song, you know, where we're talking about the time when we're all in the new world.
Este cántico, esta canción tan hermosa que hablamos de cuando estaremos todos en el nuevo mundo.
You know, brothers, try to sing that song in a prison with 40 of our young boys.
¿Serás capaz de entonar esa canción en una prisión con 40 chicos?
Who are all there for their faith.
Todos encarcelados por su fe.
No, who are all there because you and your friends insist on them being there.
Well, of course, we're trying to sing, everyone's crying.
Hacemos lo posible por cantar y todo el mundo en lágrimas.
Well, we finish with prayer.
Terminamos con oración.
Here comes the first young brother to talk to me.
Y aquí viene el primero de los jóvenes, de los chavales, para hablar conmigo.
Now, he only can speak just a little bit.
Solo puede expresar un poco, decir pocas palabras.
And then he's just overcome with emotion.
Y entonces vencido por la emoción.
And he just begins to literally sob. Just cry with his whole...
Empieza sollozos.
And so now what am I going to do?
¿Y qué voy a hacer yo?
I don't speak Korean.
No hablo coreano.
So I just grabbed him and gave him a big hug.
Así le cogí y le di un fuerte abrazo.
And when I let him go,
y cuando solté a este,
here I had 40 Koreans.
Aquí 40 coreanos en fila.
All waiting for a hug.
Todos esperando su abrazo.
But I want to tell you what I learned from that.
Pero no os diré lo que aprendí de eso.
You see, at the beginning of that meeting, those young men looked like people of the world, you know.
Al principio de la reunión, aquellos jóvenes se ven como mundanos.
At the end of that meeting, they looked like our brothers.
Al fin de la reunión se veían como nuestros hermanos.
One meeting.
Una reunión.
That's the power.
Ese es el poder.
So what's the point?
¿Y cuál es la lección a aprender?
Get to the meetings.
Asistamos a las reuniones.
At the beginning of the meeting, they all looked like people of the world. And by the end of the meeting, they all looked like brothers. And the transformation that took place during this meeting is proof that the meetings have power. Hopefully I don't need to explain what a load of epic nonsense this is. So the reason why these poor lads who were in prison, at least partly because of the governing body in the first place, the reason why these young lads looked like people of the world to Mark Sanderson is because they weren't wearing suits and ties. They were wearing prisoner outfits, prison garments, and Mark Sanderson didn't know them, so they might as well have been people of the world. But by the end of the meeting, they'd all talked to one another, they'd all got to know each other, and therefore they were no longer strangers, and therefore they were brothers. There is no magic about it. It's purely a case of getting familiar with people. And yet Mark Sanderson really wants to sell this idea that his experience illustrates the power of meetings. It isn't the power of meetings, it's the power of people being able to get to know each other when they're in a confined space over a 2-hour period. But I actually don't think that he's relating this experience to deliver the point he's trying to convince us of. I think he's relating this experience because he wants to impress upon his audience what a loving, empathetic person he is, how wonderful it is that he embraced one of these prisoners and then was prepared to embrace all of his friends. I think it's a publicity thing. I think he genuinely sees this as an opportunity to present himself as being this warm, loving, compassionate, empathetic individual. It's all about him. But if you think I'm being overly cynical, just wait until you hear the next experience where, again, it's all about him and it's all about him trying to impress upon his audience what a star he is.
You know, so many times we may go in the ministry and we don't really feel that great.
Muchas veces podríamos salir a predicar y no nos encontramos tan bien.
But we make the effort to go.
Pero hacemos el esfuerzo necesario para salir.
And Jehovah blesses us.
Y Jehová nos bendice.
You know, maybe I can share with you this experience I recently had.
Quizás podría explicaros esta experiencia que recientemente tuve.
I was in Colombia.
Estaba visitando Colombia
for the special convention.
Para la asamblea especial.
And you know, when you go to these special conventions, especially as a member of the governing body, I'll tell you, by the end, you're so tired.
Y ya podéis comprender que cuando uno va a una de esas reuniones, en esas asambleas especiales, sobre todo como miembro del cuerpo gobernante, a la conclusión, uno está cansadísimo.
Oh, poor governing body members. It must be so stressful and draining for them to attend these special conventions. I bet after a long, hard day of being surrounded by adoring worshippers and badgered for photographs, all they want to do is just get back to their luxury hotel room and knock back a complimentary glass of champagne.
But, you know, Monday, we wanted to share in the ministry.
Pero el lunes queríamos participar en la predicación.
So even though we were very tired,
aunque nos encontrábamos muy cansados,
we said, let's go in the ministry.
Dijimos, salgamos a predicar.
So the brothers arranged for us to preach with a small congregation right in the city.
Los hermanos organizaron nuestra predicación con una congregación pequeña en el centro de la ciudad.
So we were preaching from door to door.
Íbamos de casa en casa.
And I was preaching with a young brother.
Y yo iba con un hermano joven.
And we were having a very good conversation with this woman.
Y estábamos disfrutando de una conversación muy buena con cierta mujer.
And the woman was in her upstairs window.
Y la mujer estaba, entiendo, asomada en su ventana de arriba.
So we were both looking up like this.
Los dos mirábamos para arriba.
Talking to the woman.
Hablando con la mujer.
So we didn't see what was happening behind us.
Y no nos dimos cuenta de lo que pasaba detrás nuestro.
Because we were completely involved in this conversation.
Estábamos absortos en esa conversación.
But what happened was,
pero lo que pasó es,
a car drove up.
Un coche se acercó.
With all tinted windows.
Todas las ventanas, todos los cristales ahumados.
And it was obvious that the driver was looking at me.
Y muy evidente que el conductor se fijaba en él.
So the brothers were frightened a little bit.
Los hermanos llevaban un pequeño susto.
So without me knowing about this,
y sin que yo me diera cuenta,
one of the branch committee members was with us. He came and stood between me and the car.
Él se aproximó y se puso entre el hermano Sanderson y el coche.
Interesting how there is a branch committee member on hand to take a bullet for Sanderson. Remember, this is just an ordinary field service experience.
So now when the man jumped out of the car,
cuando el hombre saltó del coche,
they asked him, is there something that you want? Do you need something?
¿Quiere usted algo?
The man said, yes, are you Jehovah's Witnesses?
El hombre dijo, sí, ¿son testigos de Jehová?
We said, yes.
Sí, señor.
He said, well, I used to study the Bible with Jehovah's Witnesses.
Pues tiempo atrás yo estudiaba con los testigos de Jehová.
But I don't study the Bible anymore.
Pero no estudio la Biblia ya.
But I still watch broadcasting.
Pero todavía veo broadcasting.
Is that the man from broadcasting?
¿Este es el hombre que sale en broadcasting?
The brother said, yes, it is.
Sí, lo es.
He said, you know, I can't believe that those men from broadcasting go from house to house.
Sabes que no me es posible creer que estos señores que salen en broadcasting salen de casa en casa, van de casa en casa.
So the man gave a contribution
El señor dio una contribución
and said that he would come to the regional convention the next week.
y dijo él que la semana siguiente asistiría a la asamblea regional.
Well, you know, that's the kind of joy that we get from our ministry.
Bueno, ya nos damos cuenta. Ese es el gozo, el tipo de gozo que disfrutamos en nuestro ministerio.
We went out with feeling tired, but we came in with a joyful cry.
Salimos cansados, pero volvimos con un grito gozoso.
Again, Sanderson is giving us a feigned reason for relating the experience that is quite clearly not the real reason. So he's trying to tell us that he's relating this experience because as a governing body member, it's very tiring for him to go to special conventions, and it would have been very exhausting for him to go on the ministry, but he persevered anyway, and as a result he had this marvelous experience, and therefore we should all learn from this, and even when we're tired we should go on the ministry. And that is purportedly the reason for him telling this story. I would argue that that's not the real reason for this story. I would argue that there are two main reasons for him telling this experience. Firstly, he wants to impress upon his audience that he's just another ordinary Jehovah's Witness who goes on the ministry, even though he's only working as part of special convention arrangements with branch committee members, not with ordinary Jehovah's Witnesses. And we learn more about this being a special arrangement where governing body members work with branch committee members as we listen on in the same talk, because he describes going on the ministry with members of the Spanish branch committee later on. In other words, it's not like ordinary witnesses get a chance to work with Mark Sanderson in the preaching work. The second reason for Mark Sanderson relating this story is to impress his audience with his celebrity. In Sanderson's mind, he is a big deal, and ordinary Jehovah's Witnesses should be impressed with the fact that an ordinary passerby should recognise him when he's out doing preaching work. I would also be intrigued to know what became of the woman they were speaking to in the upstairs window, who apparently they were engrossed in conversation with before this guy interrupted them. Did they continue that conversation, and what became of the conversation? Was it a case of her being put to one side while they focused on this guy who recognised Mark Sanderson from the broadcasting? All in all, I found this an intriguing video to watch, and I'm going to try and make it available to you in a link form in the description in case you're interested in watching the whole thing. Just to warn you, it is rather tedious to listen to the whole thing. I've just given you the parts that I found interesting. But before watching this video, I confess to kind of having a little bit of a soft spot for Sanderson, albeit one that was diminishing with time, because when he was first announced as a governing body member, I thought, well, you know, let's give him a chance. He might turn out to be a nice guy. And I was a little bit irritated by him almost pretending to be a Bible scholar when he was talking about the collection of Bibles at Bethel. He seemed to be setting out his stall as someone who was an expert on old Bibles, which I wasn't quite buying. And then there was the whole Philippines disaster thing, where he was front centre and very clearly milking a tragedy for the purpose of propaganda for Watchtower. Again, I was willing to kind of let him off the hook with that, because I thought, well, you know, you might just be doing what Watchtower's told you to do, and you're the one who's drawn the short straw. But I think now I've had a chance to watch him in this talk, I'm seeing a side of Sanderson that's very smug, very self-indulgent, very full of himself, and very anxious to impress upon others his importance. And after watching this talk, my already shaky opinion of Mark Sanderson as being the possible good guy on the governing body, it's taken a hit, I'll be honest. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe beneath the smug, condescending demeanour is a really genuine nice guy who doesn't think too much of himself and is just going along with what he thinks is best. But on the evidence of this video, I'm not quite buying it. But I hope you have still found this impromptu rebuttal interesting and entertaining. I'd be interested to know what you think about it all in the comments below. And as always, thank you for watching.